Hi fans, please like our video and subscribe to the RotoWire channel. Then please go to rotowire.com/pod for a free 10-day trial.
Welcome to a semi-emergency edition of the RotoWire NBA podcast. It is Thursday afternoon, December 3rd. Nick Whalen joined, as always, by RotoWire's assistant NBA editor, Alex Barutha. Alex, we have some major news to discuss. Reggie Jackson is re-signed with the Los Angeles Clippers. In other news, late Wednesday night, the Houston Rockets flipped Russell Westbrook for John Wall and a protected future first-round pick. We'll dive into that deal, have some reaction, talk about what it means for both players' fantasy value. Maybe not a massive change, at least on the surface, and the other ramifications of that deal for Houston and Washington. And then we'll get into both LeBron James and Anthony Davis re-signing with the Lakers. Both moves expected. LeBron, though, committing to a 2-year deal, maybe a little bit less of an expected move than Davis re-upping for 4+1. But I want to start with the Wizards and the Rockets. This is a deal that had been rumored for the last 3-4 weeks, but never to the point where you actually thought that it was going to happen anytime soon. I think it would have been a lot less shocking to me if this deal went down a month from now or at the trade deadline. Once we had a chance to A, see John Wall on an NBA basketball court, see what he looks like, and B, maybe get a little more clarity on James Harden's future in Houston. But the Rockets went ahead and pulled the trigger, and I think this is almost equally surprising from Washington's perspective, if only because they've been so vocal about wanting to keep John Wall and wanting to unite him with Bradley Beal. Tommy Shepard said at their informal media day earlier this week, like, no, we're not trading him. We haven't talked about it. And obviously that was all completely false. That was a lie. And John Wall is now paired with James Harden and DeMarcus Cousins with the Houston Rockets.
Yeah. It sounds like from what Shams Charania reported that, the Rockets and the Wizards, they kind of let things settle for like weeks. Like they made the initial call, then didn't speak about it again for like half a month at least, and then got on the phone and got the deal done within a couple hours. And I assume those couple hours were just like pick protections and like, I want Thomas Bryant. You're not getting Thomas Bryant, stuff like that. Because that's what I would be demanding. Yeah, we Garrison Matthews available. I think from Washington's perspective, yeah, it's weird to like give away your like franchise player basically, but it sounded like he wanted out after the rumors surfaced that they were thinking about trading him. So that put them in a weird spot. Overall, I think Washington probably won the trade. I don't think it's a major win, but you get a guy who is at least hasn't missed like 2 years with a Achilles injury.
Right.
And, by all accounts is still basically an all NBA player. You pair him with Bradley Beal and you have a shot to make the play-in tournament in the East.
Right. And I think with John Wall, they were in that position. I think with Russell Westbrook, your floor is raised a little bit higher. Like you said, you don't have the extreme risk of a 30-year-old player who hasn't played in 2 calendar years coming off of an Achilles. I mean, there's a route in which that goes horribly wrong, and you're one of the worst teams in the NBA. Westbrook hasn't exactly been a beacon of health himself, but he's not coming off a torn Achilles. And, I think he and Wall are, at their best at this stage, fairly comparable. But I think Westbrook is still the better player. And again, he comes with so much less risk. So if you're the Wizards and your goal at this stage is just stay relevant, keep Bradley Beal semi-happy, make some progress this year, don't finish 14th in the Eastern Conference, I think Russell Westbrook definitely helps you accomplish that goal. And I think Bradley Beal is a good player to pair with Russell Westbrook. And that says more about Beal and how well he would fit around just about anyone. But you kind of need these specialized, if Russell Westbrook is going to be your second star, your first star has to fit around him. And with James Harden, it kind of worked, but it was kind of a my turn, your turn dynamic. And I could see this being a little bit of a better partnership with Bradley Beal. In Houston, I don't know what to think. It's going to be such a strange fit, and we don't have a lot of time to analyze it. James Harden is still going to be James Harden. I don't think John Wall really changes that. I think it's going to be a pretty similar dynamic to what we saw with Wall and Westbrook, or excuse me, with Harden and Westbrook last season. I think Wall in theory offers maybe a little bit more spacing, but at the same time, he's played point guard specifically his entire career. All the way on up. He's never really been asked to move off the ball. He had that guy, in Bradley Beal to play off the ball. So, James Harden is not going to just suddenly shift over to shooting guard and be fine, taking spot ups. That clearly has been borne out over the last 3 years, playing alongside other point guards and Paul and Westbrook. So, what do you think this means looking at it from a fantasy perspective for both of these guys?
For Harden, I mean, some of it depends on what Steven Silas does with the offense. I still think Harden will be, obviously he's going to be the focal point of the offense. There's still going to be a lot of isolation plays. They'll probably run a lot more pick and roll now that they have Christian Wood. So I'm not expecting a ton of change for Harden necessarily. I mean, it's conceivable that his numbers drop. It's also conceivable his numbers go up, right? Wall may not be available for a ton of games. He may not be 100%. And if that's the case, the team might be sort of worse.
He's also a lower usage player than Westbrook.
Right. For Wall, aside from the injury concerns, which are real, if he's going to be off ball more, then his assists could go down. I wouldn't be surprised if he averaged the fewest assists per game of his career, which I think would be like 7.5 or 7. I think he might take more threes than ever. I think he's averaged about 4 or 5 over the past 3 or 4 years. So I could see his threes going up to 5 or 6. I could see his assists going down. I think he has to just make an impact as a 3-point shooter and a defender, which is really weird to say about one of the best distributors that we've seen over the past, half decade or so. But it's tough coming back from an injury, and he's coming back from one of the most devastating injuries you can suffer, and is on a role that he has never played before, probably in his entire life.
Right. And he's going to have less than 3 weeks to, not only adjust to a new system, but like literally move from DC to Houston. Like at what point do you actually get settled? And, it was already going to be somewhat of a dicey return given the injury and given the layoff. And now throwing in, moving to a different city, I think just complicates that even further. So a really weird deal. You said last night, like this is a deal that you would make on 2K when you're bored and you're like 3 years into your franchise and you're just like, I want John Wall on my team now. I'm sick of playing with Westbrook. And that's kind of what it felt like. One thing that we should note is a future first round pick goes to Houston in this deal. So, it's somewhat fair to say, I'm trading my junk for your junk or my bad contract for your bad contract. But when you consider that a first round pick is going to Houston, it means that Russell Westbrook is considered the more valuable player in this deal. And I think that's correct at this point, especially considering the injury risk that comes with John Wall. I want to go through the protections on that pick. So 2023 is the first year that it can convey. That year it's lottery protected. 2024, it's top 12 protected. 25, it's top 10 protected. 26, it is top 8 protected. And if it doesn't convey by 2026, it becomes 2 second rounders. So chances are that's not going to happen. But it's a semi-valuable pick. That's something that could be the 9th pick in the 2024 draft or whatever that might be. But at the same time, for Washington, it's fairly minimal risk. It's not like you're ever going to be giving up the number 2 overall pick in 2025.
Yeah, Tommy Shepard did a pretty good job of making sure that the protections on the pick were good. And I think, again, that's kind of why I think Washington won the trade for the most part. Was they got Westbrook. They'll be competing in their conference. Good chance to retain Bradley Beal, and they didn't really give up significant picks. I still have my doubts about the team to some extent, but we also haven't seen Westbrook in the East.
That's true.
And, the play-in tournament also is a huge factor. If they can get into the 10th spot, they have a chance. The rest of the team, I'm not super in love with, although I like Bertans and I like Thomas Bryant. If Hachimura takes a step, that will be big for them. But yeah, it's just a really strange trade. Like guys whose values were at all-time lows, and they got traded for each other.
So how, for Washington, does this make them the favorite for the 8? Or, if we're assuming Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston, Indiana, Miami, Philly, Brooklyn, barring a catastrophe for any of those 7 teams, they're probably the top 7 in some order. How do you view Washington when you compare it to, Orlando, Charlotte, Atlanta should be in the mix this year? What is their standing now on paper?
I mean, I think they're pretty much neck and neck with Atlanta in my book. I just can't trust Orlando. Like I know they keep making it. There's so much other talent like surrounding them between those two teams and Chicago. And I wouldn't be shocked if Chicago was able to sneak into the 8th seed either. I think I would put them on pretty equal footing with like Atlanta for sure. But again, Chicago's in that mix for me too.
All right. So from Houston's perspective, does this change how you feel about the Rockets going into the season at all? Or does it all kind of hinge on whether James Harden actually wants to be there and ultimately plays out the season there?
That has a lot to do with it. I mean, their floor is way lower, like you mentioned. Like if Wall is only available for like 40 to 45 games and he's playing at like 75% in the new role, it's like that team is not going to look great. And Eric Gordon also has his, like if Eric Gordon and John Wall both miss, combined like 35 games or something like that, it's going to be rough for them. And the Christian Wood signing helps, but it doesn't help. It's not going to vault them into a new like tier of Western Conference teams.
I don't have any proof on this, but I'm pretty sure for the last like 5 years, Eric Gordon has missed 26 games and then signed a new 4-year, $80 million deal every offseason. Like people just seem to gloss right over that. I think with Houston, I'm a little bit surprised they make this deal. I don't know what the relationship is between Harden and Wall. You would imagine that given what they've said, given their public stance, James Harden would have to sign off on this to some degree. It's not a move you make. I think if Harden says, I'd rather play with Westbrook, I don't think you make this deal if you're the Rockets. But at the same time, if I'm putting myself in James Harden's shoes, I don't look at this roster and say like, all right, I feel so much better about this now. If anything, it's a wash. And I think, again, based on the fact that a pick's coming to Houston, there's a case to be made that they probably lose this deal, at least in the short term.
Yeah. And I mean, it may have been a case where, Westbrook and Harden didn't want to play together anymore. And the Rockets come to Harden and they're like, these are the offers that we have for Westbrook. Like they're awful. The best person we can get is John Wall. Like that's really all we have. So are you cool with that or not? Like I feel like that's probably most likely what happened. And so I mean, you'd probably rather play with John Wall than whatever just random. I don't even know what other teams wanted Westbrook. So.
Yeah, I mean, you heard like Orlando, you could maybe build a deal around like Aaron Gordon or Markelle Fultz, something of that, ilk. But again, not anybody that's going to make James Harden suddenly feel great about staying in Houston forever. I will say I don't, the Harden stuff aside, when your superstar player asks out, that's a pretty big issue for a franchise. But, it wasn't that long ago that a lot of people thought Houston was going to knock off the Lakers in round 2 of the playoffs. I think people talk about Harden and Westbrook like it was a complete disaster last year. And really, that wasn't the case at all. I think they collapsed in the playoffs. I think not having a big man against the Lakers specifically really did them in. They had some bad shooting performances in that series. But, it wasn't like this was a terrible team last year. I think if they had run it back with Westbrook and Harden, there's still a case that they're a top 5, top 6 team in the Western Conference just because of how much of a floor raiser James Harden is and even how much of a floor raiser Russell Westbrook is, at least in the regular season. So again, from Houston's perspective, I don't necessarily get it. I think even if you're getting peak John Wall, that's not, enough to push this team over the top. And maybe we'll find out there was something more behind the scenes that prompted them to deal Westbrook when they did.
Yeah, they got exposed pretty bad by the Lakers in the playoffs, and I feel like the book was kind of out on how to defend them because OKC almost upset them with like some of the worst offensive playoff basketball that you can even remember. And so, yeah, I think they had to. I mean, they could have just ran it back, but neither of those guys were going to be happy doing that. And I don't know. They are making moves geared towards the future, right? So they get a first-round pick with Wall, and then they ended up trading Covington to the Blazers for was it 2 firsts?
2 future firsts, yeah, including one that was in this past draft.
Right. And they got Trevor Ariza, and then they signed Christian Wood, who Christian Wood is a perfect signing for them because it bridges the gap, right? If they want to stay competitive, he works. If they want to tank, he could be their 1 or 2. So they are making moves tilted towards a future without James Harden, I think.
I still think the Rockets are a playoff team. if Harden plays out the season in Houston and Wall stays relatively healthy, we keep forgetting like Christian Wood would have easily been their third best player last year. You still have PJ Tucker. Losing Covington is big, but not irreplaceable. I still think they have a chance to be kind of the same team as last year. But does this change? If you're James Harden, does this change like how you feel about the roster in the short term? Like, are you still trying to get to Brooklyn or Philly, or does having John Wall on this team, having Christian Wood, does that make you feel a little bit better about at least giving it a shot?
No, I don't think so. I think there are plenty of other better situations he could probably force himself into, and ones that project to be better. I mean, he's also, he's in his prime right now, maybe late prime, I would say. So he doesn't have a ton of time. He's not the type of player who's going to stick with Houston and be like, well, maybe in 4 years we can get back to where we were. I think he just needs to put himself in a better situation.
Okay, so let's shift over to the LA Lakers. Not as much to unpack here. Like I said at the top, I think the more surprising of the two deals, and both were surprising in their own ways, but LeBron didn't have to commit to 2 years. He's still under contract through this coming season, and then 2 more now on top of that. He didn't have to commit to that at all, and this kind of goes against how LeBron has operated for most of his career, contract wise. Always trying to maintain leverage, always looking ahead to whether early in his career he was willing to take minor pay cuts to allow roster moves to happen, and he's kind of moved past that. And it seems like this is a security play in some ways. Not that LeBron James needs any more money at this point. Like I do think it's kind of funny when people say that. Like obviously he wants the money, but he doesn't need any of this money at this point. $85 million it's crazy to say, but kind of a drop in the bucket for LeBron. But it gives him a minor annual raise. I think he was due to make like $41 million next season, and now that'll be bumped up a little bit. But I think the more important thing is it gives a little bit more security to Anthony Davis, who this morning agreed to a 5-year extension, $190 million with the Lakers. It's a 4+1, and it eliminates the risk, I guess, for Davis of something happening this year. LeBron, piecing out in free agency, and all of a sudden, Davis is in LA, which there are worse places to be, but he'd kind of be there alone. So I think this was kind of a subtle way for each of those guys to show support to each other about their short-term futures.
And that makes sense, right? They're just coming off the NBA title.
Right.
They played extremely well together, about as well as LeBron has played with any other teammate, and they got better. I mean, I've heard some people like argue whether or not they got significantly better in free agency, which I think is to me, that's insane. Like you add Schroeder and Harrell, who are the 2 6 man of the year candidates. I know Harrell kind of got exposed in the playoffs, but that team from everything we've heard about the Clippers, nobody even wanted to play for that team. Like they hated it there.
So here's what I'll say about that. For one, the bar was set pretty low last year. Like this Lakers roster was not good. Outside of LeBron and Davis, It was a pretty bad roster. And I think in the modern NBA, at least in the last 5 or 6 years, that roster doesn't compare to a lot of the teams that have won the title. Obviously, the 2 stars at the top are as good as any, but most of the teams that have won have had a lot better depth than the Lakers have had. So on one hand, they had a lot of room to improve. And I also think the bar for improvement, because of all the player movement and stars changing teams, has been set really high that, getting Dennis Schroeder and getting Montrezl Harrell and getting Marc Gasol is kind of like that's okay, but you didn't get another all-star, because so many other teams are able to acquire an all-star, or we've year after year we see a team get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in the same summer. So I think when you compare it to some of the other teams that have quote unquote loaded up in free agency, it kind of pales in comparison. But when you compare it to the 2019-20 Lakers roster, I'm with you. It's night and day. I've said before, I'm a little skeptical about Marc Gasol. I think he looked extremely washed up for almost all of last season, and not bringing back both Dwight and JaVale, you don't have a ton of center depth. But the counter to that is, well, if you need him to, Anthony Davis can just play center, and then you're totally fine.
Yeah, I think he's just there to fill minutes in the regular season mostly, and then if things get weird in the playoffs, you can throw him out there because he's still a great veteran. He'll probably be a good locker room guy. He'll probably keep guys in check, right? And
just like Dwight did.
Yeah, exactly like Dwight did. And Dwight's gonna be doing that in Philly. He's gonna hold. He's got plenty of post moves to show Joel.
That's not going to go well. I want to get out in front of that. I don't think that's going to go well.
Neither do I. I think the Lakers did incredible this offseason. I don't know what you could have expected. I wouldn't have even expected this from the Lakers. We talked about on one of our podcasts getting Dennis Schroeder to the Lakers. Mm-hmm. I still didn't think it was going to happen.
I would say the Lakers, looking at it from LeBron's perspective personally, I think this is the first time that he will go into a season with unquestionably the best team on paper since 2013. 2014. I don't know how people felt about that last version of the Heat when Wade was kind of falling apart, but it's been a while since he's really been on the clear best team. And even last year, and I was one of those people, I would have leaned towards the Clippers. I thought they had a better roster. And this year, if the Nets get James Harden in the next 3 weeks, maybe that'll change. But they're the favorites for a reason. And I think what makes the Lakers offseason a little better is, the Clippers did okay. They added Serge Ibaka. They made some minor moves. They overpaid for Marcus Morris. There wasn't one other team that got dramatically better. A lot of the other contenders either kind of stayed the same or made improvements on the margins.
Yeah, I agree. And even the Clippers, those locker room issues, I don't know if they're going away, right?
No.
Between Kawhi and Paul George and everybody else on the team, plus paying Marcus Morris $60 million. So that stuff's not going to go away. I mean, and a lot of those teams got worse, right? A lot of teams in the league who were ready to kind of make the leap or like really compete with the Lakers got worse. Denver got worse. Houston got worse. Right. Milwaukee stayed the same. They might be one of the only teams, but Boston, I think, got worse. Toronto got worse. Miami stayed the same. I think they they're in a tier of their own. I think LA right now.
That's a good point. I think we'd feel a lot differently if Denver had been able to get like Brad Beal, a team that pushed the Lakers in the West Finals last year. Like you said, a lot of those teams stayed the same. So even though the Lakers didn't have like the greatest offseason of all time, when you make a B plus level additions like they did, and everyone else is making like C plus additions, that really pushes you over the top. So, I mean, the security too of having Davis locked in, having LeBron locked in. I mean, very quietly, LeBron was about to go into an expiring contract season, which, normally that's like the top storyline in the league. There's been a few times throughout his career where it's just turned into a complete circus. And obviously things change when you win the title, but had they not won the title last year, like let's say they flame out and lose to Denver, in the West Finals, I don't think LeBron is committing to this deal, 2 years, 85 mil and just locking himself in. I think there would be even more pressure put on the organization, and LeBron wouldn't be willing to, to kind of put his own interest to the side like this.
Yeah, this is about like the best possible scenario I think LeBron could have found himself in at age 35, right? Like best even conceivable. He's in LA. He gets to watch his son play basketball. He just won a title. He set up with Anthony Davis. The roster got better. Like how what else would there have been?
So I think you're right. I meant to bring this up. I think it was on the Ringer pod, excuse me, last night. They mentioned kind of the same thing of like, he's in the best basketball situation. I think that is true, especially when you consider the family aspects. He owns 2 homes in Los Angeles. That there's, a lot of pull to him being there. But do you think that if he became a free agent this coming off season, like after this year, just straight up became a free agent, is there somewhere else that would give him a better chance to win, say, 2 titles in the next 4 years? Like what if he is essentially in the position that Harden is in, and could go to a team like Philly, or theoretically could he go to Brooklyn? I mean, it would be weird. And I think if his only goal was to win a title and not care about how it would look and what his role would be, I think there maybe might be a better spot where he could stack the deck. But in terms of him being the man and living the lifestyle that he wants, I think LA is clearly the best spot.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are other teams where LeBron would be just as much of a favorite to win the title as LA. If he forced himself to Denver or something, or Milwaukee or Brooklyn, any other team, right? Like,
biggest thing would be he'd be eliminating the Lakers as a contender while going somewhere else. Much like when KD left the Thunder. It's like not only is he making one team stronger, he's eliminating arguably their best competition.
Right, like any team in the top 5 if they were to add LeBron and retain most of the other talent. So I see that point, but I just think like he's set this up so perfectly for himself, and it worked out insanely well. It's hard to believe, actually.
Yeah, usually there would be more drama. This is around the time that Kyrie Irving would just out of nowhere ask for a trade, or Kevin Love would start to decline rapidly.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is probably the best overall team that he's had around him probably since the 2016 Cavs, and even a lot of the depth pieces that they were relying on that team, like Richard Jefferson played big minutes in the NBA Finals that year. Channing Frye was a huge role player for that team who kind of got played off the floor later in the playoffs. Like they had depth, but it wasn't great depth. J.R. Smith was the starting shooting guard on that team.
Yeah, this is a good situation for him. I don't know. The more I think about it, it continues to be crazy how good he's playing, how old he is, how he's probably gonna end up being the leading scorer in NBA history. He might end up playing with his son. Because I think doesn't his contract just go through? Doesn't he become a free agent when Bronny can get drafted? Is that how it's set up?
So his son is a sophomore right now, which would mean he'd be eligible for the 2023 draft, assuming by that point, you'll be able to go right out of high school.
Yeah, I think that would set him up, right?
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really like. It's also worth noting that Bronny James is like not the number one prospect in his class at this point,
Right.
and is by no means a lock to be a one and done.
Still, I mean, that would be. I mean, I think that's going to happen, or at least they both be in the league at the same time. I think that's going to happen. Not that they'll necessarily play together, but when that happens, that'll be one of the. I mean, that'll be one of the biggest moments in sports history.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, like even if Bronny, ends up plateauing as a prospect and he's like a 3-star as a senior, I still think he's going to get a spot. But much like LiAngelo Ball, just signed a camp deal with the Pistons. Like that is exactly what will happen. Like there is no way, like the Lakers are rostering Giannis's brother for no other reason than like, hey, just in case. Like they will find a spot for him, and the Lakers will take him with the 60th overall pick if it comes to that.
Yeah, they are. They're just putting rings on Giannis' brother's finger so he can go show Giannis and be like, "Wouldn't you like one of these?"
Yeah, and according to Instagram this summer, I think that worked out pretty well. All right, we'll cap this one here. Normally we'd go for another like 45 minutes rambling about Tony Snell's fantasy value, but this will just be a quick one. You'll be back for the return of the Friday pod with Ken and Shannon tomorrow. Is that right?
That is